Hello, Jen.
Hi, it's nice to see you.
Great to see you again. I hope you're staying healthy and more importantly, warm during these brutally cold days on the East Coast. Super excited to chat today. We obviously had a fun little pre-chat end of last week that left me extremely inspired and super encouraged of the world ahead. So I'm super looking forward to this discussion. I'm not going to lie. Normally, whenever I have a chat by a fire, it's typically accompanied by a glass of wine. But in these days, I'm actually resorting to tea. So if you see me take a few sips, I'm having some tea.
All right.
Well, let's dive in. I think the folks tuning in today are going to be excited about our chat and discussion and learn a lot. So first and foremost, I did some homework over the weekend, even more so than prior to our pre-chat. And your background is nothing shy of impressive. So I would love for you to share with the folks today a little bit about your career pathing in this retail world. You've done it all from your days at Macys to even on the vendor side at Facebook to now at LVMH. So explain to us a little bit more how that journey has gone and what you're up to these days in your current role at LVMH.
Sure. So I had the privilege of joining Macy's at the time that the business was very different than it is now, in that it was, and as many department stores were at the time, regional nameplates that really knew their local customer and had a deep relationship with local customers. Over the time I was at Macy's, we went through an organizational change, a transformation where Macy's became a national nameplate. And with that, the growth of Macys.com was a huge driver of the success that we had. Now, there were some ebbs and flows. It was a bit of a roller coaster, as it was for so many in retail, as we learned about how the customer wanted to shop with us, what her expectations were of us. And I got to have a front row seat for a lot of the change and digitally led transformation that happened at Macy's. I went from working in the private brand organization for a number of years, where we had our hands in everything from developing the packaging, the brand identities, the advertising and media investments that were made by the brand, all the way through the in-store environments that were created in Macy's stores and the growth of our e-commerce through Macys.com. Then I moved over into role leading digital strategy within the marketing organization at Macy's, and that's where I got to establish what our presence was in social media and in a lot of other places where the brand was starting to have a presence that complemented what we were doing in e-commerce. And then my last role at Macy's was leading customer acquisition and retention. So I had responsibility for our loyalty program, for credit marketing, and worked very closely with all of our customer data. And as I was in that role, I found myself at Macy's for almost 15 years, which was longer than I would have ever expected. And as the company had changed so much, the time passed really quickly. But I was ready to consider doing something else. And I had really fallen in love with media as a function. So I had a relatively brief, my professional semester abroad was with MediaLink, where I did quite a bit of consulting on kind of the intersection between media and retail. With a number of MediaLink's partners, and then went to Facebook for a couple of years. And in order to immerse myself in the platform, I'd never been in a platform role. I'd never really been in a sales role. And boy, do those great people in sales make selling look so much easier than it actually is. It's even when you're selling something that is super compelling, it's still such a huge challenge. Gave me a great appreciation for sitting at the same table in a different seat. But I knew that I was someone who really wanted to be back on the brand side and within, and informing brand decision making. And this opportunity at LVMH came along as kind of a combination of what it's like to be in an influencing capacity, kind of an internal advising capacity on the topic of media, really having a full appreciation for the role of branding and the role of performance and driving e-commerce outcomes, driving omni-channel outcomes, really understanding what the value is of first-party data, and thinking about the key partnerships that we have across the media landscape, increasingly in the digital space. So with Google, Facebook, Snap, for sure. And what that means now for me, what's been a great learning experience is applying the luxury lens to how we think about the role that our maisons play among the various brands that our customers can choose from, and what makes luxury different, and why we make some of the decisions that we make at LVMH, which is arguably the largest and best resourced luxury goods company in the world.
That's great. So on that topic, you mentioned what makes luxury different. How is LVMH unique in that regard? And also, can you tell us a little bit about some of the brands under the LVMH umbrella?
Sure. So the portfolio is incredibly diverse. We range on one end of the spectrum from all the brands that Moet Hennessy owns, including Veuve Clicquot and Dom Perignon. Hennessy cognac is obviously a big anchor. Belvedere vodka. We own some smaller spirits brands, and we really dominate the champagne and wine marketplace. Then on the other end of the spectrum, complete other end of the spectrum, is Sephora, which in terms of multi-vendor retail are they're kind of the OGs and really understanding what e-commerce and loyalty look like in an omni-channel experience. And then in the middle are all the brands that we have in the fashion, leather goods, watches, and jewelry space and beauty space, where they have a balance of incredible owned retail experiences, a little bit of wholesale, and then building their own e-commerce. So Louis Vuitton, Christian Dior, Fendi, Celine, Tag Heuer, Bulgari, most recently Tiffany, and then a number of beauty brands like Fresh and Fenty, let's see, Guerlain, Parfums, Christian Dior, huge businesses. And so it gives, for someone like me who gets to work across the entire family of brands and different types of retail, different types of commerce, basically, it's kind of like being a kid in a candy store.
So with such an extensive portfolio of luxury brands, how do they continue to approach the marketplace such that they are differentiating themselves within the luxury marketplace, but also staying true to the overall LVMH brand and culture?
So we're a company that's grown by acquisition, and so many of the brands that are now part of the family are brands that have been well established over, in some cases, hundreds of years, and grounded in the principles of luxury. So there has been a deep commitment at all of the maisons to the craftsmanship, the quality of what it is that we make. There's a comfort level with scarcity. There are only so many cognac grapes that can be grown. There are only so many handbags that can be made in a way that it really adheres to our standards. There's generally a creative visionary. Often that's a designer who is seen as part of, who's putting a runway collection out into the world, or some other kind of creative visionary or anchor to the heritage of the brand, or a connection to what makes the brand unique and have a place of defining what the category is about, as opposed to allowing others to define it. And then the last piece is around the experience that we provide. So really thinking through at every touch point, what is the way that a consumer is engaging with these brands, and how much of that would we like to be able to control ourselves and really make incredibly special and unique ourselves, ultimately, often in our stores.
So it's no secret that the retail commerce world, as well as consumerism, continue to shift. Actually, these past few years, you would argue it's been accelerated as a result of the pandemic. How has LVMH evolved as a portfolio of brands within the retail space? And how has this marketing strategy evolved as well as this shift continues moving forward?
Big question. So, I think there are a few things that have gone on. I think over the last few years, we came into holiday 2019, early 2020 with the wind at our back. Many of our businesses were doing exceptionally well. Many of them delivering results that were kind of the best that we had ever seen. There was, for all of us, the phenomenon of not understanding or knowing entirely what to anticipate in the spring of 2020, when the world turned upside down. When we had to shift for a couple of months here in the US to e-commerce as our only storefront, I think there was a whole level of appreciation for what e-commerce could contribute to our business. Outside of Sephora, I would say many of the Maisons had not fully understood the impact that e-commerce could have as a complement to the business that we would do. And so as stores opened back up in kind of late spring, early summer of 2020, I think we entered back into the world with a few things that have worked to our advantage. First of all, we have incredible brands that have always had desire around them, a built-in level of demand that we don't take for granted at all in our need to build brand affinity, brand awareness out in the market. But we really do have a privileged position in terms of our brands being generally beloved. Then we have the ability to create an experience as people come into our stores or onto our sites that feels very special. And when people were still in a mode of lockdown or in, their activity was very constrained, and a lot of us were looking for an escape, luxury brands, and ours in particular, were able to offer a bit of an escape at a time where a lot of consumers in the US had an extra disposable income. And so we saw our business recover even more quickly than we were expecting. The other piece that worked to our advantage in a diversified portfolio is that Americans drank a heck of a lot as we were all in lockdown. And so to have wine and spirits as part of our portfolio on top of everything else, as people were indulging in a new handbag, even though they weren't going anywhere, or believe it or not, even in lipstick and fragrance, the fragrance business has been on fire since the shutdown. So we were set up because we understand what our business is about and how to do it well. We were set up exceptionally well, given decades of strong investments in branding and in preparation for e-commerce. And then we're able to capitalize on it by continuing to provide an incredible experience and thinking really intelligently about our media investments as a way to stay relevant to consumers that we knew and introduce ourselves to consumers who might be considering luxury purchases for the first time.
That's great. So as mobile continues to boom, and obviously the screen in our back pockets being our primary means of entertainment and communication, there are so many different ways today to engage with the consumer. And as innovation continues to intensify, how has social media specifically grown as part of your strategies in the importance of engaging with your user base or the consumers you intend on targeting most? And how are you embracing that level of innovation and experimentation moving forward?
So I mean, there are a few different pieces here. First of all, so much about social media, and especially where we play most dominantly, is in the space where it's about being inspired and discovering new ideas and being part of a world that sometimes goes, certainly over the last couple of years, goes beyond our home offices or our the homes that we've been stuck in. And so this idea of being inspired by the outside world, or being inspired to think about indulgences we might want, whether it's trips we'd like to take or meals we'd like to eat or people whose lives we'd like to be a part of. That inspiration piece in terms of social media is something we take very seriously. We also have a privilege in that many of our Maisons are followed like celebrities. And so as much content as we're putting out into the world organically, there are people who are looking for it actively and who want to be part of the world that we've created. So there's that part of it. Then we've been able to think about social media as a place for relationship building. If being social is about connecting with other people, whether it's about using influencers in a way that reinforces what our brands are about, having consumers talk about us very favorably, thinking about the relationships that we can build through creating content, putting it out into the world. And then lastly is the piece around experience. So especially in some of the work we're doing with Snap, where we're excited to extend and create a more intimate relationship with consumers by giving them things to play around with. So that's where AR starts to be really interesting for us, whether it's on the practical side of trying on a lipstick, getting a sense of whether a color is the right color, or potentially starting to build out things that become a little bit more exciting about, being in physical places, or, our imaginations run wild with what's possible, giving people access even to what a personal shopper might make available to them through a social shopping environment, or starting to think about live streaming and access to some of the experiences we create on a runway or in a store.
Yeah, we spoke about this on Friday, how when you think about the way consumerism is heading, there's an expectation that as a brand we set, right, to help guide consumers today, rather than telling them what to do, but more so inspiring them on what to do. And I think that's one of the things that I appreciated most listening to you speak the other day, and even today, is the atypically high quality bar that LVMH sets in the marketplace. And it holds everyone else accountable to meet those levels of standards. So it is much appreciated listening to the way that you describe this. It's funny, in the last Fireside chat, LVMH got a nice little shout out acknowledging how quickly you guys and how healthy you continue to grow as a business. So clearly it's no secret, LVMH is a leading luxury goods company in the world that is growing at a very healthy rate. So with so many new retail and commerce brands entering the game, many of which promise, well, luxury at a lower price. How do you continue to differentiate yourselves and maintain that growth by avoiding the price factor?
Well, it's funny. We don't really talk about price, nor do we fixate on price. What we try and adhere to are all of the things we value that justify ultimately the price that we will charge. So it really comes back around to the quality and craftsmanship of what we make, and not compromising on what that is about, and the creative vision that comes, so that there is a new iteration of a handbag or a new iteration of on a regular basis, even in the, that we push on the edges of technology in terms of the watches that we make, but we are using the finest possible materials, and we are making sure that if we're putting something out into the world, that it's a reflection of the brand that has been built over time. And so, I think we have remained very focused on what it is that we do well at an individual maison level. Now, you touched on this earlier. We arguably have a lot of maisons who compete with each other. We've got, in the fashion space alone, as someone was walking down 57th Street or up Madison Avenue, the number of different choices that someone has of where they could buy a really beautiful handbag, whether LVMH owns them or not. There are many, many choices. And so we also are very focused on being clear about what distinguishes each of our maisons from the other, and that there is, depending on what an individual customer's personal style is, or what it is that she's looking, a hole she may be looking to fit into her wardrobe. Each of our maisons needs to be distinct from one another, whether it's the femininity of Dior or of the adventure and joy of travel, and seeing the world that Vuitton has as part of its DNA, the kind of French chic of Celine, or the Italian femininity of Fendi. Like, each maison needs to be very distinct one from the other.
So, full transparency, after the past 2 years that we've experienced, I actually bought my wife 2 Louis Vuitton gifts this past Christmas, a handbag, as well as boots. And I can honestly say it's probably one of the most exciting Christmases I've seen her have as a result. So how do these heritage brands like Louis Vuitton and Dior just stay coveted for so many years? Like, what is that secret sauce that just keeps them ahead of the marketplace?
I think it's so interesting, coming from Macys, where we mined our first party data and really understood our customer. I think both Vuitton and Dior and all of our maisons, they really understand their customer in a way that is data driven, but also really in having conversations and deep, intimate relationships with customers in our stores. So we do know our customer exceptionally well. But we also have resisted the urge to chase our customer. We feel a responsibility to kind of shape what it is that our customer wants, and to have a distinct point of view, and that there's a responsibility to say, I'm going to bring something to you that you've never seen before, because that's what's expected of a designer luxury, couture brand in a lot of ways. It's not about always providing the thing that, if you only paid attention to the customer data, the customer would be telling you, I want more of this. It's about exciting them and inspiring them and compelling them to take a risk to purchase something they haven't seen before, as opposed to just repeating the thing they've seen over and over again. So it's a delicate balance, because it's tempting to, maximize the opportunity that exists as someone who's, growing a business, to continue going back to the well on the thing that's always done well. And we definitely do have a commitment to kind of classic styles and the things that have been part of the foundation of our business. But there is an expectation that we will always have something that is new. It's part of the commitment we make by having a runway collection that comes out every several months, because we continue to think about where the world is going in terms of a point of view. At each of the Maisons individually.
That's awesome. And I think about it a lot. Oftentimes, when I think about my experience in the marketplace, even prior to arriving at Snap 5.5 years ago, and when you think about the challenges that we oftentimes face as marketers, I believe it's self-inflicted, because we're not listening to the consumer or not taking into consideration the experiences that we should be producing. And when I got to Snap, one of the things that holds true to this day that I've always appreciated most is, one, Snap was never designed to be another Me Too company, much like LVMH and the brands that you guys produce. And we build towards an expectation, right? We innovate at a rate that delivers on behalf of our consumer, our community, as well as our partners such as yourselves. So there's a great appreciation for that, and being able to deliver at such a high expectation and rate, which is great. So I continue personally to be inspired by the great work that Snapchat as well as LVMH produce together. We continue to build beautiful creative experiences for our community. And much of that building is driven by the power of augmented reality. Your team continues to be very forward thinking in this space. You continue to lean in and be at the forefront of innovation with Snap as it relates to augmented reality across many of your brands, which has been one of the things that's excited me most this past year, was just seeing how many more brands of LVMH are participating on Snapchat. What is it that excites yourself, your teams, about augmented reality, and how will it continue to play moving forward with the way that you think about creativity, as well as engaging with our community and consumers alike?
I think, as I've said a couple of times, this notion of having a deeper, richer experience is something that we're very committed to. And what has been exciting as we watched not only consumer time spent move so deeply into the digital space and interactivity on mobile, we really feel like there's an opportunity that AR provides that allows consumers to come closer to product and to get more involved with what it is that we're selling. And so I think we are also very careful and deliberate about doing what we do with best quality partners, because we also want to make sure that the experience that we put out into the world is at the quality standards that we would set for ourselves. But I think there's a level of intimacy and connectedness in the digital world that AR holds the promise of. I also think, as interested as we are in developing these sorts of experiences out in the public space, like Snap, to the degree that you guys are public, we also are trying to understand how these sorts of experiences enhance what we do within our owned environments. And we're starting to think about, okay, how can we learn from best-in-class partners like Snap and bring some of these ideas back into, whether it's our own site or into our store environments, in a way that really enhances what a person working in a store is able to do. So we're talking a lot about what the future of personal shopping looks like, what the future of clienteling looks like. And if consumers choose that what they would prefer to do is shop with us in a way that is not always in a physical space, how is it that we can elevate and improve the experience we're giving them digitally? And I think, so, there's the surface level play that we're doing within kind of the media space, and then we're really trying to study what this means for the fundamentals closer to our business.
That's great. And as a company, we've been quite bullish in the marketplace with our stance and our belief in the effectiveness of augmented reality. And we will continue to invest heavily with this notion of computing technology overlaying the world. And we're super excited, obviously, for yourself and your brands to be part of that level of innovation. Moving aside from augmented reality for a second, from an industry perspective, what are you most excited about when you think ahead to the upcoming year or even many years to come? What are you most excited about as the retail industry continues to evolve? And what are some of the bigger shifts that you are anticipating when you think about LVMH moving forward?
So I think, though it is incredibly daunting to think about how all of us move forward in the media space without some of the tools in our toolkit around third-party data that we've had in the past and have gotten accustomed to using, I'm actually very encouraged by the opportunity ahead for luxury brands and for LVMH in particular with regard to first-party data, because we have valued collecting customer data since we opened our stores. I think, now granted, that data was collected in a leather-bound notebook that sat underneath a register or under a counter for a very long time. And it's taking us a lot of effort to really be able to organize, synthesize, and use the first-party data that our consumers have entrusted us with for years. And then to figure out, okay, once we've done that work, that administrative work, and secured the trust and permission of customers who have built a relationship with us over time, the opportunity that's ahead to not only really understand luxury shopping behavior because of the breadth and depth of our portfolio, but also to really start to think about what an advanced, more intimate relationship looks like with customers who've entrusted us with this information about their preferences, their wardrobes in some cases. We know more about them sometimes than they know about themselves. So I'm very excited about the possibilities there. I'm also really excited about what's happening in the space where creativity and art are appreciated differently. So if you start to think about kind of some of the experimentation, whether it's in NFTs or it's in the space that's really about things that are unique and quirky and driven by an artistic sensibility, that's where we are very strong, is around people who want to enjoy something that is distinct, it's unique in the market, it helps an individual express themselves differently. That's also an area where we can be very strong. So I think a lot of the collaborations that we're seeing that are becoming more and more artist driven, and then also in the digital space as well as in the analog space, are really interesting.
So just to piggyback on the consumer question, you mentioned that it's super important for LVMH to protect their consumer, but how do you guys go about defining them on a per brand basis to ensure that you're meeting the brand need?
Well, for now, each individual business unit globally operates independently from one another. So it's not to say that there are not consumers who have made purchases across multiple brands that we happen to own. LVMH as an entity is transparent to the consumer. We are not in the business of building LVMH as a brand. We build individual brands. So whether it's Tiffany or whether it's Bulgari or whether it's Louis Vuitton, Dior, I'm just working my way down 57th Street as I think through who's there. Each of those brands is distinct. They operate distinctively. It's their responsibility to really understand who their customer is. There are relatively few of us operating at a group level who have a vantage point of looking across the whole portfolio. And that level of independence and autonomy is a big part of what allows each consumer to be defined in a way that's really distinct.
That's great. We have 5 more minutes. I have 2 fun questions that I'd love to hear from you.
Okay.
First off, LVMH is known for being a best-in-class advertising, creative driven company. Can you tell me about some of your favorite all-time campaigns that you guys have built and deployed in the marketplace?
So there is an incredible, and it was a very fortuitously timed campaign that's been going on for a number of years with Hennessy around unfinished business and working with what were entrepreneurs in the Black community for a long time. And now we've expanded the definition of it to help entrepreneurs and small business owners in communities of color. And Hennessy has deep roots in the Black community. And we value that tremendously, also in the Asian American and Latinx community. And right around the time of the COVID shutdowns, Hennessy was announcing a really deep commitment to helping small businesses. And what better timing could there have possibly been at a time that small businesses needed it the most? So it's a campaign that has also involved some brand creative in partnership with Nas, and also has come to life in a lot of the activations we've done with the NBA. And in a deep relationship we have with the NBA. And I think what strikes me as being so powerful about this campaign is that it's really valuing the customer and all the entrepreneurs that live within the core customer population. It's providing real visibility and support for the community. It ties back, it makes all of the investments that we're making in our brand campaigns have a ethos to them, a core integrity to them that feels really good as a brand moves forward into the 21st century at a time that a lot of us are talking about DE&I. That for us is an idea that's been years and years in the making and has come to life in a way that we feel really good about. So that's one I've loved. From a media standpoint, I've been really impressed with what the Tiffany team has done when they launched the About Love campaign last fall with Beyonce and Jay-Z. They certainly brought it to life through a beautiful package of video. They put it out into the world in the digital space especially, and created kind of a moment where everyone was seeing that campaign simultaneously in September of last year. And then they managed to use out of home in an incredibly powerful way throughout the fall and holiday season, where they wouldn't just go and buy a few pieces of out of home. They would take over an entire market. My favorite execution was the one in Mexico City, where they took over the sides of buildings and had an enormous projection of these incredible pieces of video, including the iconic Tiffany blue. And then they commissioned the local symphony orchestra to play Moon River. So when you think about the heritage of Tiffany in terms of the iconic color, the Breakfast at Tiffany reference, the Tiffany diamond integrated into that creative, on top of an iconic New York couple who were the embodiment of love. And I think the fact that they pulled in so many different touch points that were uniquely available to Tiffany was really, really special and impressive.
That's great. And yes, I love that actual creative. And it's one that my wife and I enjoyed when I got her something from Tiffany's, or at least she asked for it as usual. Final question. And I think this is actually a fun one. So we started our careers, many years ago, not trying to date myself, but over the course of the past 20, 10, 15, 5 years, massive shifts in the way media is consumed.
Yeah.
What are some things or decisions today that you make where you probably, when you first started this business, you never thought were going to be the case?
Well, I mean, the fact is that midway through my career, the mobile revolution started. And I remember, as you do probably, when marketers would talk about this being the year of mobile, as if it was going to be constrained to 1 year, right? Because we'd figure it all out and we'd be done.
Hearing it for a while, yes.
That's right. And so what's fascinating to me is how much the introduction of what could have just been a device has changed every single component of how we communicate with each other as people, of how we think about ourselves as consumers, about how brands can build relationships and also drive commerce through a screen that's the size of an index card. And just the power that comes with that, and how it requires each of us to stay on our toes in terms of how it is we adapt to the world. There's no mastering a corner of marketing or media anymore and thinking, okay, that's done. Now I can go and on my merry way and continue to think about the world differently. It's, I think, the fact that now we have to relearn and iterate and improve all the time makes us all better marketers.
Last question from me, and then we'll see if we have time for a Q&A. What's one prediction you're making for the new year in 22?
Lipstick is back. I think, and we're seeing it in our business, actually. Our Dior Rouge lipstick is on fire. I think that among women, we've all done the skin. Our skin has never looked better. Exactly. Thank you, EB. Lipstick is back. That's my prediction. We are optimists who are looking forward to a day where we can take our masks off and wear, whether it's a nude lip or a red lip, it's back.
That's actually fun to hear, simply because our AR try-on, our beauty try-on products at Snap are being led and driven by makeup, lipstick, and other beauty products. So super fun to hear. Those were all we had to chat. I don't know if there are any questions in the chat box. I don't believe I see any, unless I'm misreading this.
There was one, and it's a doozy, and I'll give you the 60-second opportunity to answer a small little question like, what do you think about the metaverse and the mobile gaming space? That was from Shira Garat.
I mean, it's a space that, you know, there will be a corner that makes sense for luxury brands, our brands in particular, to be in. And we've dabbled a little bit here and there with gaming, not so much the gaming integrations that some luxury brands have done with like within a game. I think it's defining space. I'm most curious to see what ends up happening with the extension of our fashion presentations through runway shows and what that starts to look like. You know, I think there's always this tension too between what's exclusive and what's open to all, and trying to think through what does that mean in a space where it has been about the physical world in a runway show being broadcast live through digital channels, and then what might that start to look like if it isn't always about actual models in a physical space, and you know, what kind of creativity might be expressed there as a complement to and you know, at some point, who knows, maybe a replacement for, but you know, trying to think through what, you know, what that comes to be.